Hi there, I'm John and welcome to my YouTube channel. If you are returning, welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you are new here, welcome. I'm John from Nigeria, and on this channel I review books. I sometimes do the book reviews via monthly wrap-ups, and sometimes it's through like the singular videos for specific books. So if you are interested in that sort of thing, that's what we do on here. And yeah, this is a video was spawned by a recent happening in like the bookish world, the bookish sphere abroad, really, in America, that happened this past week. And it was the 100 books of the 21st century list that was gradually released by the New York Times. And I have to say, it was one of like the most exciting things for me being here. I don't know how it was for other people, but for me it was quite exciting because I like bookish lists. I really am a major fan of American literature. That's what I read mostly, so I enjoy this kind of lists, seeing like new books or seeing books I've heard about, maybe getting more praise and maybe amping them up in my TBR, so want to read them more. So it was kind of like the bookish highlights of the week, and maybe of I don't know if to say of the year so far. It's one of the things that have, at least it has been like that I've seen like the most excitement for, like bookish wise, like that was everywhere and not just, let's say, limited to Bookstagram or BookTube or BookTok or that sort of thing. So it was really just an event that like covered everywhere, and I was very pleased with it, and I was following it religiously, of course, because I wanted to see what would be at the top, what would make the list. And yeah, the list was said, according to the New York Times, voted on by 503 novelists, non-fiction writers, critics, and other book lovers, with a little help from staff of the New York Times book review. So it was quite a collective effort from the regarded like critics and authors to compile this list of what was like the greatest, what were the 100 greatest book of the 21st century. So like you could imagine that it would like turn a lot of heads, because the writers who were involved, they were Stephen King was among the writers who agreed to submit. We had Stephen King, we had the actress Sarah Jessica Parker, we had Marlon James, the author, we had Min Jin Lee, Roxane Gay, we had so many authors, like so many authors. We had Karl Ove Knausgaard, I think that's how you say his name. And so it was just like they each had like their respective submissions. I think they were asked to submit like at least, like the list was at most 10 books. Some people submitted less, so it was just kind of fun to see like their lists and what made like the cut in general. So I just had so much fun, and I just decided to come, and I decided that I would talk about it a lot, and just like the highlights of it for me, like from the list, what I enjoyed seeing on the list, what I had read, and like my thoughts on, maybe just overall thoughts on the book, because spoilers, I have not read a lot of them honestly. So we'll talk about that as we progress. But I just wanted to, like, I love talking about books even when it's books I've not read, so maybe people who have read it can give me more insight and more info on them. So there were a lot of that on this list, probably popular books I'd heard of, but just like seeing them being shouted out by some of these authors and being pushed as like some of the greatest work of like this century so far, which is quite a very high praise for a book to show up on this list, was quite interesting. So I just decided I would make this video, and yeah, let's really get into it. How many of the books on the list did I end up reading? Had I read by the end? The answer is one. It's one book. I don't know. The thing is, like, okay, let's say preface. I have been reading. I think I said I've been reading since 2017, probably my first or second video. But I did not start reading, like I started reading mass market books like Harlequin romances. That's what I started with actually, and that was like those mass market books which you would not even see on like the bookish space nowadays. Those were what I read for probably like 2017, 2018, and a good chunk of 2019. I think I had like a shift in my reading for the first time when I read On Writing by Stephen King. I read a Stephen King, I saw a Stephen King to read before that, but that was the first book that kind of shifted because in those days, well, I would say 2017, 2018. In 2018, it was mostly like Wattpad stories. That was where my bag was at the time, and even in 2019, like that was the reading I did. But in 2017 was maybe the first time I tried reading a book, and I did not read maybe more than 2 or 3 books or 4 books that year. The next year maybe a book or two, but really reading more Wattpad stories. So it was not until 2020 during the whole pandemic and COVID lockdown that I started to like see more and more of like the classics like online and learn about like what the classics were and what classics were in general. But even then, I did not read much. I think that was the year I read The Old Man and the Sea, then The Diary of a Young Girl by Anne Frank. But in that year, I was still reading a lot of like the mass market things because that was the only books I could see around me to borrow since I had not started buying books for myself then, and that's the books my neighbor owned, like most of the Daniel Steele, Fern Michaels, like Nora Roberts, those kinds was what I could get my hands on. And since I was reading then, it was maybe through the internet I would see some of the classics. So I never tried reading any of the classics because I was like hoping to see them one day to buy them physically. And I think it was in 2021 I discovered like BookTube as a whole, and I think I discovered the channel Noelle Gallagher first. She used to have a channel. She has a channel, but she's no longer filming. And then I discovered Paperback Dreams Cats, and they just like opened my world to like new books, so many new bookish things, and they were the two I like religiously watched for a chunk of that year and even the next year, and was just consuming their content because I'm very specific to like channels I watch, and like I follow very few subscriber few people here on YouTube. So I think those were like the major two I was watching, and those were like really my only YouTube content. So and that's where I got to see like more of the YA books, and that's where I learned about the Bookstagram space and joined in 2021. And it was probably in 2022 that I got more exposed because a lot of the things I was like getting interested in, not really reading because I could not see them except ebook, and it was not easy to get those ebooks also. So it was probably what Kat's Paperback Dreams was reading, because she had like some really cool picks. Like I read horror and I read mystery a lot, so she read like around that genre but branched out sometimes to some things that I had never heard of which would excite me. And so I think it was around 2021 I learned about A Little Life in 2020 and the sadness, and that's when I got sent my copy of A Little Life and some other books like Call Me by Your Name and like The Silent Patient, which were big like Bookstagram hitters then, which then I read those in 2021. And it was just like from 2021 2022 I started learning more about like the contemporary American books, but even like more exposure to American books and things like translated literature. I think I read my first Japanese lit in 2021, but this is getting like a little reading history, but I just want to give a preface. So that's why probably I've not read a lot of these books on the list. It's like the lack of reach to a lot of them being from here, because it's very rare to see some of like a lot of the books on the list here, except you are ordering it from there. They have to be extremely popular for you to see them here. So that's one, and ebooks not always easy to get to. But yeah, that's like little reading history. So I have not read a lot of the books on the list. Out of the 100, I'd only read one. I'd heard of quite a number of them, but I'd only read one. But let's get into my thoughts on the list. Yeah, so I am probably wearing a different shirt, as you can see, because the first half of this video was filmed over a week ago. We have had like constant rain. The sun is never out. You can see the sun is not really out at the moment. I just really missed filming, and I've been trying to get a time where there was no noise around me because there has been more noise, rain, so it has been impossible to film for over a week. Maybe the moment I say I want to attempt filming, there's something. It's either the rain just comes down, makes everywhere dark, or there's noise around my house. Or in some cases, I've been complaining that the days have been finishing very fast for some reason. It just feels like we are morning, afternoon, evening, and the next day there has been little time to do anything. In fact, I do not spend the day doing much, but all of a sudden it's out, it's finished, and it has just been a lot for me. But we'll get into the video. I've already made my statements in the first half, so yes, the list proper. Let's get into it. At 100, we have Tree of Smoke by Dennis Johnson, an author who I have never read, but I had heard of another one of his works, Strange Dreams, which we'll see later, which is on this list. I cannot recall where it is, but I want to read Strange Dreams. I don't know about this one. I just thought to note it because I want to read that one, and so maybe in the future. I've heard it's a very good American author, so if I like Strange Dreams, I will eventually maybe want to check this out. At 99, we have How to Be Both by Alice Smith, released in 2014, and I want to read this because I read Alice Smith in May. I finished her in May for the first time, and I was astonished by her, probably the most astonishing writer I have read all year, and I'm looking to read like that quartet. I will talk about that book Autumn in my May wrap-up, which I know it's June. Everybody at this point, you should know that you should know that I'm way behind the times in everything. So, but I'll talk about Autumn in my May wrap up. And yes, I really want to read this one. At 93, we have a kind of popular, should I say, book talk, bookstagram darling, and it's Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. It was released in 2014, and I know it's kind of like end of the world sci-fi. I did not ever really want to read it, but seeing it here just kind of like maybe piqued my interest a bit more, and so yeah, I want to read this. At 92, we have The Days of Abandonment by Elena Ferrante. It was translated in 2003, yes, by Anne Goldstein, and I have read one Ferrante before, which I've talked about on this channel. Next month is Women in Translation month again, and I read her for the first time in August last year, so I'll be reading this book in August this year because I want to read her, like, some of her short works before tackling the big quartet, which we will talk about eventually. At 91, we have The Human Stain by Philip Roth. This was released in, okay, I do not have the date here, but I am very much interested in reading this because I finished my first Philip Roth novel last week, and it is in contention to be my book of the year, and I am currently undergoing a kind of very big writer project, and we'll see. I don't want to talk about it much yet, but I really want to read more Philip Roth. That's all I can say. At 90, it was The Sympathizer by, I cannot pronounce it, but I think I'll try it, Viet Van Nguyen. I don't know it. I think this is a Philippine author. It was released in 2015, and it won the Pulitzer Prize, which made, I was interested in it from just seeing like its affiliation with like winning the Pulitzer, and I know it's very critically acclaimed, so seeing it on this list and being one of like the most praised works of the decade I've seen so far, I want to read this. At 88, we have The Collected Stories of Lydia Davis, and it's by the author Lydia Davis, who I read last year. I read Samuel Johnson is Indignant, and I did not like that book so much. I liked like seeing just a fresh style of storytelling where we could just have like a story which is a page long. There was a very big bird that just whooshed past there that scared me. But there are stories in that book which are just a page long, and it's collected short stories. There are some that are just like few sentences, and I was very pleased with it because I kind of write in the same manner like that, just musings and thoughts. So I was fascinated by that style, but overall as a collection I did not love it. But I might be looking to read this one or more of our works in future. At 82, we have Hurricane Season by Fernanda Melchor, and this I is also translated by Sophie Hughes, released in 2020. I know this because I've seen a couple of Bookstagram, Booktube friends also, especially my darling Alex from What Page Are You On, talk about it and enjoying it also. And so, very much interested in this. At 81, there was this novel, Pulphead. It was a collection of essays by Jeremiah Sullivan, and I had never heard of it at all, but I really like the cover and I like reading essay collections, particularly personal essays. So I was just fascinated by this one and added it to my list. At number 80 is one of the very few I own physically, and it's The Story of the Lost Child by Elena Ferrante, and this is the fourth and final book in the Neapolitan Quartet, and I was surprised to see it here because it's the second Elena Ferrante and it's not the last. And yeah, I recently received the third and fourth book for my birthday from a friend in the UK this year because I really wanted them and I knew I could not get them here, and she sent me something every year for my birthday. So this last year it was the first two books. This year it is this last two, which made me exceedingly happy. So I finally own the whole quartet and I'm so pleased to have it. At 78, we have Septology by Jon Fosse. It actually has my first name, Jon John. I don't know why it's pronounced Jon, but that's how I've heard people pronouncing it. And this is translated by Damien Searles, was released in 2022, and I was kind of like, I don't know, I can't feel some kind of way seeing it here because this book only got very popular over like the last 2 years, maybe over like last year, because he won the Nobel Prize last year, and he was an author that I can bet you a lot of people had not been speaking about because I've been on this space for a while, even though I do not watch, let's say, more than a handful of channels. Then I've been on Bookstagram since 2021, and I follow like the varying sides of the coin, people who read like extremely popular and people who read like niche things too. So there were very few people who talked about him until he read the Nobel Prize and until he won the Nobel Prize, and suddenly everybody knew him, and a year later he's landing on this list. So I kind of like felt like that about it, but I still want to read it because I've heard very great things about it. At 74, another book I want to read, Olive Kittredge by Elizabeth Strout. Modern Ajuma, one of my favorite channels on here, she describes her as an Anglo-Saxon Elena Ferrante, which just kills me, but she likes some authors I really like, and I really want to check her out because I've heard like this is a very good novel, and it's actually won a Pulitzer Prize also, and it is a series of stories in a book series, and I hear she writes more human, like character study, everyday living type stories, which you know is my bread and my tea, so I want to check this out. At 71, we have the Copenhagen trilogy by Tove Ditlevsen, released in 2021 as a whole, but it's 3 separate memoirs in this one memoir, and I want to read it because of Alex from What Page Are You On as well. And I've been trying to incorporate more memoirs into my reading. I've read one. I've been reading another one. I've been on hiatus reading it. I started it last year, January in 2021, but I've not returned to it. I do intend to finish it, and I've spoken about it, A Waiter in Paris, but I want to read more memoirs also, and yeah, so I have this on my list. So at 68, it is the only book I have read, one of my favorite books from last year. It's The Friend by Sigrid Nunes. I was so pleased to see it on here because I think it's deserving of a spot. I would even put 2 of her works on here. I love Sigrid Nunes so much, as you know, she's my favorite author of all time. So I was just glad to see her get like this recognition on the list because I do think she's brilliant and phenomenal, and everybody, I know I've said it, if you watch my channel, you make me so happy by reading her, coming to talk to me about it, but I was so glad she was on the list. At 61 is last year's Pulitzer Prize winner, which people have talked about a lot, so I'm not surprised that it made like this list, and it has just been so praised. It's Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. I want to read it because a lot of people I like, Alana Estelle, who has a channel on here, some other channels I have. Even Alex from What Page Are You On surprisingly had it on his list, which made me want to read it even more than anything. So I really want to check out this one because I've heard it's like a very big, long, grand story, which is usually my favorite kind of story. So yeah. At 59, another one I own, it's Middlesex by Jeffrey Eugenides, winner of the 2003 Pulitzer Prize for Fiction. That is the year I originated into the world. So I'm so silly. But yes, I showed this in my last video. It's in my big book summer video. So yeah, it made the list. 56, there was this book, The Flamethrowers. I'd never heard anything about it. It's by Rachel Kushner, but the cover was intriguing. I'm not really a cover is intriguing, so I read the book kind of person. The first time I did it was for a book I hated, kind of. I wrote a really bad review of it. The author blocked me. I was kind of too mean tagging. That's probably the meanest thing I did because I did like authors seeing my reviews for any time I wrote a review, but I did not know then that you do not tag authors in main review. And I have written a 3-star review where I tagged the author and she actually really liked it and even wrote back to me on it. So but I know going forward I will not be doing something so silly as that. I really kind of hated the book and wanted her also to know that I suffered reading her work. And yes, the book is no hard feelings. I read it in 2022, don't mind me. So yes, but moving forward, at 54 is one I already had on my TBR, and it's 10th of December by George Saunders. He's one of the 3 authors who have 3 books here, which was one of the things I was a bit like iffy about, because I was like, if some authors have like 2 books, that's understandable. 3 books is quite a lot of space that other authors could have gotten like those spaces. So but I heard it's like a really good short story collection. He's an author a lot of people like and who I want to check out. So yeah. At 52 is Strange Dreams by Dennis Johnson, which is already on my TBR list. So this is the Dennis Johnson I want to read. At 50 was the joint winner of the Pulitzer Prize last year, and it's Trust by Hernan Diaz, and I wanted to read it because I've heard it's a big American, very American story. It's talking about a specific time in America, but I did not look too much into it. And once I actually saw it here to buy, but I did not have the money that day, and I was hoping maybe I'll get it eventually. But the vendor does not keep books for people, so I just like if somebody else bought it, then it will just make me know that it's not there again, so I will not like feel so bad about it. And somebody else did buy it eventually, but it's one I'm hoping to read. And some of these big books I rather own them physically as opposed to like reading them online, which is even hard to see also. So yeah, that's the. At 49 we have The Vegetarian by Han Kang, one of the books that has been on my TBR the longest since I found out about like the bookish community. I really want to read this. I've heard it's very very weird, but I've heard it's very very good. It made Alex's list also, which I think just pushed it up for me because I think I knew he had read her, but I did not know that this was one of his like favorites and what he would consider one of the best of the 21st century overall. So yeah. At 46 there was The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt. I want to read this book. I want to read The Secret History. I want to read this book even more because Stephen King, it was on his ballot, so I was quite fascinated by that, knowing he had read it and liked it. So I really want to own The Secret History physically. It's always so expensive when I see it, but I have decided I'm not going to read that book until I get a physical copy of it. At 44 there was The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. This was a kind of, I think this is a kind of, I don't know if it's sci-fi or I think it's fantasy. It's linked more towards fantasy, and it's not one I've ever been interested in, even though I know a lot of friends or a lot of people who read both like the literary things, but I know a lot of people who have read this in that vein, they like it. So seeing it here, I was very much more interested, and I finally added it to my list. I know it's a trilogy, but maybe if I like this one, I'll read the rest. We'll see. At 41 is Small Things Like This by Claire Keegan, which is a book that has blown up over the past 2 years. Claire Keegan, an author who has blown up over the past 2 years, and I really want to read this because I've heard she writes very short fiction that does a lot under 100 pages. So I'm so excited to get to her work. Hopefully, I'll be able to read one of them this year. At 31, we have White Teeth by Zadie Smith. I got this last year. I finally was able to get it here. I have heard this is a debut for the ages. I think it was released in the year 2000, funny enough. And I found that out from this list. So I cannot wait to read this like even more. I cannot wait to just get to it because it's so big and I want to see what everybody says is so great about it. And yeah, at 28 is a book I've always wanted to own. I've not just gotten a copy, I've not read it either. It's Cloud Atlas by David Mitchell. I did not expect like a sci-fi, or I think it is, I know this is not like specific literary. I know it's very genre wide and genre boxed. I think it might be sci-fi, I'm almost very sure. And I was shocked to see it very high. I was like, is this how much it is regarded? I don't know, because there were mixed feelings I've come to see later about it being this high or even being on the list at all. But it's one I've always wanted to read, so yeah. So at 27, Nigerian Representation, Americana by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. That's how you say her name. If you have seen so many people butcher it, white people and Americans, but that's how you say it. And I want to read it. I have not read it, but I will read it because it's one that every Nigerian who happens to read, if you read at all, you probably like this work along with Things Fall Apart, which I read and talked about. At 26, I will be going fast now, is Atonement by Ian McEwan. I've talked about why I want to read this enough, but it was on the list. At 20 is Erasure by Percival Everett. This I wanted to read because I watched the film that was adapted from it, American Fiction, earlier in the year, that won the Best Adapted Screenplay Award at the Oscars. And it was a film that I did not love, but I quite liked the writing in it and what it was looking at. And it's one of the very few things I never am able to like really relate to American. I do not really relate to like the Black American experience. So that's because I've said it before how we do not really consider ourselves Black here because everybody is Black, so it is not like forefront of your mind. And the only time where like the term Black kind of comes into our mind in that sense is when we have to relate to Americans, not just white people, Americans, Black or white in general. And so that is a film that looked at how there's a certain expectation white publishers, not just the publishing company in my opinion, even white readers expect from like Black stories. So it will be strange to see a Black person writing kind of like lit fic like sort of stories. And it's something I've gotten in comments in another angle where I used to sing on a certain app once upon a time. It was a streaming app where I was like, it was earning me little money then, and the people, particularly the Black people, Americans, they found it very strange that I was singing white songs a lot, and like always asked me why I sang so many white songs if I did not know any Black songs, and they used to call me whitewashed a lot as well. So I found it very strange because there's a certain expectation if you are from like a specific place, if you are related to a specific like let's say group of people, and there's a certain story that let's say other people kind of expect you to tell, which, and it might not always be the story you want to tell. I might not always want to talk about like suffering Africa, which is sometimes what people expect me to maybe write about. So if I'm writing something in the vein of like Sigrid Nunez, which feels more literary, and the everyday, which is what I write, I can see how a publisher over there might find it like quite strange in that sense, because it's like, why am I not writing more about this? And so it's one of, I really want to read this source material because I was so blown away. Not blown away, because I was very interested in what the film had to say and how it captured like an experience of mine. And it's one of very few like, let's say, things in that sense that it's not an overarching experience, that it's more a singular experience that I have been able to connect to. So yeah. At 15 we had Pachinko by Minji Lee, very famous Bookstagram book talk. Tome, big book, darling. I want to read this. I've heard it's very great. I think my friend who I body read with, who I have mentioned. She has read this. I think she really likes it, so I will check it out. 14 is outlined by Rachel Cusk. I have said her name on this channel before. Rachel Cusk, I will read you this year. I was not lying about that. So at 13 we have The Road by Cormac McCarthy. It's one of Stephen King's. I don't know if he's one of his favorite writers, but I first heard about him when I saw Stephen King's like favorite books list, and his book Blood Meridian was there, and I also know about the film No Country for Old Men, which I've not watched, but I know he has a book on it too. So I was shocked to see this here and very high, because I've heard that it's lately I've been seeing more people talk about it. Well, it seems he's a very beloved one. So he's an author, one of those like great American authors. Like I've said before, when I think of the three I hear mentioned a lot, it is Steinbeck, McCarthy, and there's one other one, but it's not coming to mind now. And so yeah, I really want to read this. Number 12 I own. It's The Year of Magical Thinking by John Didion, an author who I'm so fascinated by but have not gotten a chance to read yet, but I just want to read her. I just feel it in my bones. I'm going to love her because she's seems like a very quintessential American girl, and her writing, I just feel it because of everything I've heard, which is not much because I also try not to listen to too much. Like I've said before, even like back of books, I don't like to read because I just want to go into it and get a sense of what it is by myself. But this is famously known as the book she wrote after her daughter died, and so it's a very heavy on grief book which I want to read, but I intend to read her fiction first before I get to this. At number 10, it's Gilead by Marilyn Robinson, and this is one of Alex's I think it's one of his favorite books. It's one of his favorite series, and it's one of the series I discovered through his channel. And I saw that this was on a lot of authors' ballot, because I went through the ballot of the authors because like I said, fascinated in that kind of thing. And I was very shocked to see it so much, and by the time I went through those ballots, I was already very sure it was going to be in the top 10, and so it landed at number 10. I want to read her book Housekeeping, which I've heard very great as well, and I might read this series because it seems it's a kind of like Christian book series, which Christians are very much interested in. At number 9 is Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro, an author who I really want to own, who I've heard a lot of great things about. I want to read his works. I want to read this particular work because it's one of the very praised ones too. And so yeah, at number 3 was a book I got recently because of a friend, Alana Estelle, because I know she liked it, and I was shocked to see it so high on the list because I did not know it was that beloved. But it was Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel, which seems it's like so much more beloved than I actually knew. So I am much more interested now. It seems like a very chunky book and historical fiction. And usually with historical fiction for me, sometimes I do not. It's not like I've read a lot. I don't think I've read. I'm trying to think if I've read an historical fiction novel before, but it's not coming to me. I've read historical works, but maybe not a novel. So, but even with like an historical book like Diary of a Young Girl, I do not really go and read on the figure before I read the book. I rather like learn the figure through the fiction work, then maybe I can go and read on the figure eventually. So maybe I'm thinking that's what I'll do with this book particularly. So yeah, we'll see. And yeah, the number 1 book is My Brilliant Friend by Elena Ferrante, which shocked even the New York Times that it was on the list so much, that it was so beloved. But since seeing that list, I actually get why. After this list came out, it seems the New York Times put a ballot space for readers to like put their own top 10, so they'll compile a readers top 100 after like they put out their own list, which they released last week, and which I might do a quick snappy video on. I've not read much on that list as well, but I recognize a lot more of the books there. And so yeah, and I just looked at the back. 2 authors, in fact 3 authors who I want to read: Zadie Smith, who I mentioned, Elizabeth Strout, who I mentioned, who they say is is the Anglo-Saxon variety, and Jumper Lahiri have blobs on the back of it. So I know a lot of people I adore that love this book. They say it will change your life. It's about female friendships. That's the thing I know most about it. And since I just got the whole series as a gift finally, I cannot wait for when I want to read this. I desperately need it to change my life because I do not take the people who recommended it for granted. So I hope it's as good as they say it is. I think it will be. And I think a lot of people were shocked at it being in number one, as asked the kind of question if this sort of books will like stand the test of time. And I think it will actually, because like the love for it, the people who rally behind it or who cite it as like one of the greatest books, they have only become more since the list has come out. And it's everybody from people who read like both the literary things to people who read like a blend, like have mentioned this book. So I'm very eager to check this out in the future. The notable omission which kind of hurt for me was A Little Life, although I know that's very divisive and a lot of people, like even a lot of more critic author type people, do not like it. It's more readers who like, even readers, a lot of readers hate it, but it is the book where you are either here or there, and I am on the camp that I love it. And I think it would have been a good pick for the list because it's actually a very significant read of the decade so far in many ways. And also, Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn. I don't know if I would have had it on my list, but a lot of authors in that ballot had it on their own list. So I was expecting that it will make the list somewhere, and I was even going to be shocked because why? A very specific mystery type book like being so high, I did not know a lot of people liked it like that. But I've mentioned Gillian Flynn being like the mystery writer who I think maybe might be the best of the genre I've read, and being so far ahead of our peers. So I was shocked that it was not on the list. I was not too shocked, but I was expecting it to be on the list, and those were the most notable omission. So to close out this video, I could not find 10 books I really love that I would have in this kind of list, and since I've not been reading for such an extremely long time, but I found about 6 or 7 books that I will mention that I think should have a spot even in this one itself. I think should have a spot. And first one I've mentioned is A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. That's my favorite book of all time. The light is going, so I'm trying to be very quick. Then I would say a book by Sigrid Nunez. I would choose one book, and it will most likely be What Are You Going Through, because it's the first one I read, and I can say it has changed my eye as a reader since reading it, honestly. As I made this video, I just remembered somebody saying On Writing by Stephen King was published in the 2000s, and this list was starting from 2000 to 2024. And so if On Writing by Stephen King was actually published in the 2000s, I think it deserves to be on this kind of list. It deserves to be very high on the list. This book changed my life. That's the best way I can put it. If there's a book I have to cite that is like the most important read of my life, this is one of 2. And so yes, I think this book, if it's published in this decade, should be on the list. Should maybe be at the top of the list, I don't know. I would also have Sorrow and Bliss by Meg Mason because I feel it's a very significant read of that genre. Oh, the rain is so threatening. It's threatening to fall right now. Everything is shaking. I think Sorrow and Bliss, very significant read of that genre. I think it should be on the list. Then I would say something like Call Me By Your Name by Andre Aciman, and My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Otessa Moshfegh, which made the readers list, which maybe we'll talk about in the future video. But I think that is a very significant book, even though it has only been about 5 or 6 years since it has been out. But we like, if you follow like the very recent lit contemporary world, it has been replicated. It has tried to be replicated by so many female authors, so many authors since then. And the depressed woman, very sad woman going through life. It has been done before Moshfegh in case of The Belger by Sylvia Plath, I heard. which is kind of the staple for that genre. But in this vein of like the more recent modern era, I think she kind of sets something off with that book that I have seen try to be done over and over again, and very few authors achieve what she achieved with that novel. So those are maybe books I will have on this list. If you saw the list, if you have read maybe a lot of books from the 21st century, what 10 books would you have on the list? You can tell me in the comments below. And I know I'm very behind on my wrap up, so I will get speedily on them. Hopefully the weather is good so I can make another video to be put out before the end of this week, or maybe latest the weekend. I hope you are well. If you like the video as usual, please like, share, subscribe, all the nice things, and I'll probably see you in the next one.